Paranormal experiences. Today in this video by Midnight Monster, we're covering 9 stories of the craziest paranormal experiences that people have ever had. If you also have a story you would like to share, drop it in the comment section below. If you don't know who I am, my name's Midnight Monster and I read daily stories of some of the creepiest, most spooky paranormal ghost stories that you've ever heard. We're going to get started with story 1 right now. Check out the channel and I hope you enjoy. My sister and I shared a room when we were tweens, and we both swore that it was haunted. We'd hear strange sounds and see weird stuff out of the corner of our eyes. There was also an oppressive feeling of something very wrong once the sun went down. My sister and I were way too old to be afraid of the dark, and we were fine with darkness anywhere else. Eventfully, my sister refused to sleep in the room. Mom, of course, did not think there was any possible way we had ghosts, and thought this whole thing was ridiculous. Until we went to summer camp. We had been gone for a couple of nights and our dad was working in the graveyard, so Mom had the house to herself. She was getting ready for bed and heard laughter from our room. She heard it a few times before it struck her that we weren't there. Mom checked the room and the lights were on. Mom tried to convince herself that she was imagining things and turned the lights off. She heard the laughter again, and she went to check once more. The lights were on. Mom instinctively said, "You kids, go to bed!" And she did not hear them anymore. After that, Mom did believe us, but we were still kind of stuck with the room. It was an old house that we had while we were saving up for a better place. My sister adopted a cat, which helped us for some reason, but it was months before the cat would go into our room without flipping out. Like literal ears pinned back, growling, hissing, and bolting out of the room like a bullet. We eventually were able to move to a nice home, and even Mom was happy to leave. My family had a cabin next to the lake in Vermont that we spent time at in the summer. One night, while sleeping in the upstairs bedroom, I hear what sounds like someone getting up to go to the bathroom. It was coming from right across the hallway outside my door, so I assumed it was my mom, since that was a usual occurrence. Oddly enough, no lights went on and no bathroom noises. The sound of footsteps just stopped, and a minute later, I had this odd feeling that someone was standing at the halfway open door to my bedroom, watching me. This feeling went on for a few minutes until all of a sudden the feeling of something or someone standing by the door turned into the feeling of someone standing directly over the bed. For the next 5 minutes, I had the terrible feeling that someone or something was looming over me with their face mere inches from mine. The 5 minutes or so seemed to last forever. Suddenly, as soon as the feeling started, it abruptly ended. No retreating footsteps, no noise at all. Whatever it was just gone. The next morning, my family and I are eating breakfast at the table, and I still could not shake the feeling. Then, my sister spoke up and asked, "Mom, what time was it that you got up to use the bathroom last night? I could hear you up and walked around from the downstairs bedroom." Confused, my mom said that she never got up last night. My brother laughed and said, "Mom, we all heard you." Then my dad piped up and said, "No, your mom never got up and I did not either." That's when I shared my experience, freaking everyone out. Back when I was in high school in the early 2000s, I went to Mexico with my ex and his family. We went 18 hours into Mexico to visit his sister-in-laws. When we got there, it was a weird experience for me because I'm black, and most people in their town had never seen anyone non-Mexican in their entire lives. To say strangers were interested would be an understatement. The third night I was there, I awoke to a feeling I was being watched. I turned over and saw an old Mexican woman staring at me, but not in a malicious way, more curious or amused like everyone else. At first, I thought it was my ex's mother-in-law, since we were staying at her house. So, I called out to her in Spanish, but she did not answer, and after a few moments I realized I could see through her. Eventually, she walked out of the room and I tried to shake it off and go back to sleep, but I couldn't. The next morning, I told my ex's sister what happened and she says, "Oh, you saw her. I'm like, pardon? What the fuck? And she goes on to tell me that while she's never seen La Vieja, her husband has a couple of times, and the last time he saw her, she almost led him to his death. She tells me that one night a few years ago, they were once again visiting his mother and staying in her home. In the middle of the night, her husband wakes up to the feeling he's being watched. He sees a woman that looks a lot like his mother standing in the doorway. He calls out to her asking why she's awake at this hour, but she does not answer. Instead, she walks out of the room, eventually goes outside. Half asleep in a trance, he follows, calling out to her again and again with no answer. SN. His mother's house is located in the valley between two mountains and is isolated. She still draws her water from a well in the front yard. So, my ex's brother-in-law is following this woman thinking it's his mother, and eventually follows her outside. He runs after her as she jumps directly into the well. Panicked, he begins to jump in thinking he's saving his mother from drowning, but the moment before he jumps into the well, he fully awakes and realizes there's no splash and the water at the bottom was completely still. If he would have jumped in, he would have drowned. They have no neighbors and everyone else in the house was asleep. No one would have heard him scream for help. Needless to say, I packed my shit and went home early. Fuck that. I used to work at one of those Halloween pop-up stores. The kind that just rented out unoccupied buildings, you know? They had me on as a manager at this one building that used to be a CVS. And this dude's store reminds me a lot of that place. The first few times I worked there, I had opening shifts and nothing crazy happened, except that the automatic door seemed to have a life of its own. I and my coworkers joked and said that the place was haunted by some kind of spirit, like a kid or something, and we named him Tommy. When the doors open, we would just say, "Tommy just left," and when they open again, "Hey, Tommy's back." I thought this was just some fun and that the sensors on the door must have been faulty or something. At this point, I was 1000% a skeptic and did not believe in ghosts or any junk like that. The first night I closed there, I changed my mind quickly. As started to get dark, we kept seeing random stuff just fall off the shelves. This isn't abnormal in retail, but it had not happened during the day. And now stuff was falling into the store about once every 2 minutes. I still don't think much of it. There could have been a ton of explanations. So, I closed the store and it's just me and my cashier sitting in the office counting down the cash drawers. Whenever we hear something fall, we joke that it's a ghost and I send her to go pick it up. This happens frequently enough that I stop sending her because what's the point? When I'm down to the last cash drawer, we hear a door open and close. All the doors there were thick steel doors with a push bar. It was not the wind or air pressure redistributing in an old building. I grabbed a pair of scissors and had my cashier walk the store with me to make sure no one was there. We had a loading dock in the back where we stored overstock, and we used to do offices and clinic rooms near the front. It would be very hard for a squatter to hide, so we were certain nobody was there when we were done with the check. At this point, I'm a little freaked out. So, to make light of the situation, I started yelling at Tommy whenever he dropped something from the shelf, and I was counting the drawer as fast as I could to try to get the heck out of there. For context, the office was used to set up as a Halloween store. It wasn't an actual room, just a square made out of standing pegboards next to the register. So the walls did not go all the way to the ceiling, and if you moved your head around, you could pretty easily see the other side of the wall through the peg holes. Anyways, I'm counting down the drawer and about to start the paperwork when I hear what sounded like someone dragging a folding ladder with rubber feet across the floor just on the other side of the peg wall. This specific sound is one I'm very familiar with, and I recognized it instantly. Of course, nobody was there, and the ladder I heard was in the back room exactly where I left it. I just finished everything and got to go there ASAP. It doesn't end here though. Every night that I closed, something happened. We had these zombie baby dolls that made noises when you squeezed their feet. Except for the fact that all of them, except one that we sold early on, were broken. Guess what toys suddenly were talking on their own whenever I'd close? Yeah, those dolls were creepy as shit. We had a chain hung up in the front of the dressing room so that people could go in and try stuff on if an employee was aware. And it wasn't constantly open itself when nobody was there. Something was taking one end of the chain off its hook and neatly placing it on the other hook. This happened when it was just me and one cashier in the store, and the shelves were arranged in a way that you could see every part of the store with ease. They never would have been able to sneak out the back or the store to mess with me. Stuff like this happened every night that I closed, but the cashier told me that it only ever happened when I was there, and the other two managers said nothing like that would happen around them. Eventually, I kinda just took it in stride. Tommy never hurt me or anything, so it kinda stopped bothering me. One older Hispanic lady that worked there, a super sweet woman, heard us talking about Tommy and told us that the reason they shut down the CVS was that a kid had died in here. Sure enough, I looked it up and it was true. I was only able to find out a little since they did not mention the kid's name in the article I'd found on the local newspaper website. All the article said was the CVS was closed following the death of a 9-year-old boy. A bunch of people were fired at the store closing down not long after that. At this point, I wasn't a skeptic anymore. On the last day we were open, I was sorting pegs into a different crate in the back while two of my cashiers were assembling boxes in the front. A manager always has to keep a walkie-talkie on them, and the other stayed at the front, in case the cashier needed anything. So, I'm just in the back minding my own business when I hear my full name on the radio. I pick it up and ask, "Yeah, what do you need?" I did not get a response. So, I just walked to the front, and the cashiers did not need anything. They did not even use the radio. They had put it in the office before it died a half hour before. I checked it, and the radio had been on the charger but was still dead. I go back to sorting pegs, and it's not long before I hear my full name again on the radio. At that point, I put the radio back in the office since my cashiers did not have a working one anyways. The cashiers joked that Tommy was going to follow me home once the store was closed, but I don't think he did. If he did, then he's behaving himself. When I was around 13, I started getting a bad feeling around our house. There were certain areas I refused to go into, and I was terrified to close my eyes at night. I was always a nervous child, but this went far beyond that. There are a few incidents of note that I'm going to share in order, and I remember them. I was having a Skype call in my room with a friend at some point. I left the room with the video chat still facing somewhat shiny section of my bed frame. When I came back, my friend looked shaken. I asked him what happened, and he explained that he'd seen a face pass by in the reflection while I was gone. We checked to see if there was any way to move the camera to where it showed his face, and we could not find one. While looking for a game I lost, I went up to the bonus room of our house. For reference, this was a room above the garage, disconnected from the rest of the house, except through a narrow laundry room. I hated going up there. In most cases, I refused because it gave me the most horrible feeling. Some of my friends said even just going into the laundry room made them uncomfortable. After searching for a few minutes, I lost my nerve and went to head back down the stairs and get the heck out of there. As I was heading down the stairs, I froze. An icy feeling in my gut, and I started to turn around. Before I could, I felt a distinct impression of hands on the back shoving me. I just barely caught the handrail before I went tumbling and ran out like the bat out of hell. After the previous incident, I decided to put a line of salt down in the laundry room. I figured it could not hurt, and it'd be a good test to see if anything was happening or if I was just spooking myself. I put the salt down, and the very next day the feeling of dread that had been dulled throughout the house. I could relax, at least somewhat, and the stuff that had been happening did stop, until I came home one day and the feeling was back worse than it's ever been. My parents had hired a cleaner who had swept up the laundry room. I was terrified of what might happen next, but could not bring myself to get close to the source again. Not long after that, I started getting the same feeling I got from the bonus room in my room. I could feel it coming distinctly from the corner of my room. I don't know how long it was there, but eventually I got used to it. I thought again that maybe I was just scaring myself. One night I laid down and closed my eyes, and after a little bit, as I was starting to drift off, my body tensed. I could not move or open my eyes as the feeling from the corner of my room got stronger and stronger. I felt a dip in the bed at my side, and the moment nothing happened. I thought that maybe if I pretend to be asleep, whatever it was would go away. And then suddenly the feeling of hands was back around my throat. I couldn't breathe. But as I could not move, my legs started burning and tears were rolling down my face. I could feel myself starting to pass out. And just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I did not move a muscle until finally falling asleep. The next day, when I looked in the mirror, there was bruising all around the front side of my neck. I was grateful wearing collars was my thing so that no one was suspicious about me wearing a thick one for a week. Until those bruises were gone. I threw salt everywhere in my room after that. I live outside the village of Caledonia in southeastern Missouri, on the border of the Iron and Washington counties. This is an area that's steeped into history with plenty of Civil War history, as well as being built right on the northern route of the Trail of Tears. The town of Caledonia itself has plenty of old buildings said to be haunted, but the majority of some of my and other close to my experiences happen at the Caledonia Wine Cottage. I'm not going to go through every bit of history on the place, but the haunting of the place are the typical shadow people, footsteps, and the like. Currently, my grandmother owns the place and runs some small business out of it as a wedding venue, bed and breakfast. So I've spent plenty of time there both during the day and night. During the day, it's like an old building built in the 1800s, but with its little bit of uniqueness. If you go to the top floor, you'll find the cutoff of the door from when it was the quarantine room of a Civil War hospital, or the bars on the basement when it was used as a temporary jail. It's at night, though, that the things start to tend to get active. You'll hear footsteps on the stairs and find stuff moved around and all that jazz. Now, my personal experience was 2 years back. Usually we'll host events like music and such. This time we were doing St. Patrick's Day Civil War murder mysteries. I volunteered to help as an actor for the event and wash dishes. Anyways, after the event I was in the kitchen with the cook, a family friend, and we turned to ask her how her day had gone. It was when I had turned around to talk to her the plates went flying off the shelves across the room as if someone had thrown them. I won't lie and say it did not startle me because quite frankly it did. I've had other paranormal experiences, but this one was not easy to explain. I grew up in a house built in the late 1800s. Not old, but there is history to it. I had some odd experiences. I hated the top of the stairs, especially at night. If the light upstairs was off and I looked up, I always had impressions of 3 women standing at the top, arranged as if they were witches around a cauldron, except without the cauldron. My parents wrote it off as a kid's imagination, but it went on until I moved out at 18. A couple times I saw them as kind of see-through shapes when the lights were on. Family cats were not a fan of the landing either, and I often saw one cat, Marbles, hissing at it. For the second one, a bit of explanation. Upstairs was a big rectangle with a stairwell along one of the walls. Directly at the top of the stairs was my parents' bedroom, and running parallel to the stairway was 2 other bedrooms. Then the bathroom at the opposite end of the stairs facing my parents' room. My bedroom was in the middle, but I was terrified of my closet because I often saw a small shape scuttle out. Imagine the girl from Exorcist spider crawling, except an indistinct shape instead of a girl. It went across my room and out the door, so I would go to sleep with my sister beside the bathroom. One night after I braved running to my sister's room because the black shape was scuttling around, the bathroom light turned on and my sister's closet door opened on its own. The black shape started scuttling from my sister's closet to the bathroom, then down the hall and back into the closet over and over. I started screaming, and my mom came but thought I was having a nightmare. She turned off the lights, closed the closet, and went back to bed. As soon as she was gone, it happened again. This went on for 3 or 4 hours. Each time my mom left, the closet door opened, the lights would go on, and the black shape went haywire. My dad and sister slept soundly through it all. Interestingly, my sister, who's a light sleeper normally, never woke up when the black shape was harassing me, no matter how much I screamed. I would have odd nightmares on the nights the black shape was active, about being in an infinitely large black open space of large things like mattresses, but different shooting towards me in the vast space. But they all stopped as soon as I moved out. I went back a couple years ago during an open house and chatted with the owners. They were moving out because their youngest daughter was too scared to be there. She doesn't like the black doggy cloud that lives in her closet and gives her nightmares of being in a small, really big place. Or, quote, ladies that would not let her up the stairs. The ongoing joke in my family is that we come from a long line of witches. Anyways, my great uncle has these dreams where he's going to die before his junior year of high school, and it would be a family member that killed him. So the summer before his junior year, he and his brothers are out for a summer drive, in a convertible in the 50s with no seatbelts in the back of the car. The older brother took a turn too hard and fast and rolled the car. They all lived except the youngest brother. Then, when they were going through his notebooks after his funeral, they found drawings of the church, which was several towns over, and he had never been there. So, thus saw it. He not only knew he would die, but a family member would kill him, and even draw the right church. So, my grandma, who was devastated by the loss of her baby brother, got into a cult, trying to talk to the dead, and when weird shit started to happen around her house. One day, while sitting on the sofa, she got cold and started shaking, and she swears Jesus showed up and took her to hell to show her the path she was walking down. And when she snapped out of it, she became super religious. Now, fast forward years from the 50s to the 90s, I'm sleeping in their house and I hear growling. I wake up to see 2 dogs with red eyes staring at me, just big black red-eyed dogs. My dog was on top of me growling back, just this little Sheltie staring down these demons. At first, I was like, I'm dreaming. This is a dream. And then one bit me. I started screaming and my dog jumped off at them. My mom came running in and was like, who bit you? Why is your hand bleeding? I said, where's Lady, our dog? She chased them away. She was found in the basement growling at something under the steps. Every time I stayed the night, it would happen. Even after my grandpa passed away, there were no dogs in the house and I would see them. I think even my kid saw them because she started just screaming at the top of her lungs. Not a normal baby cry, but like a dying animal. I called my husband in a panic in the middle of the night and was like, the demon dogs are still here. I can't sleep. I'm getting a hotel. I talked to my grandma about it and she confirmed after she dabbled in the occult, she also started seeing things and was attacked in her sleep. She fully believes she cursed the house. I walked into my friend's house the first time and just my arm hair stood up. I got a sick feeling in my stomach and asked if something was up in his basement. He looked at me shocked. Yeah, there's a nursing home next door. I think the portal to the afterlife's in my basement. Whenever someone dies, my cat goes down there and from a circle shortly after medics arrive at the nursing home. How'd you know? I used to be attacked by a shadow dog at my grandpa's and grandma's house as a kid. I had the same uneasy feeling when I walked into your door. His wife also has been attacked in her sleep at his house shortly after they moved in. She was screaming and he tried to shake her awake. He said it felt like something was pinning her to the bed and she was 110 pounds. And he's an army vet in good shape and he could not pick her off the bed at that point. All the animals started to attack the bedroom door and he could hear their dog ripping apart the wood and its cat screaming. He said she lifted off the bed and then slammed down awoke. She had handprint marks on her arms in the morning, and no one is sure if it was him trying to shake her awake or the thing that attacked her in her sleep. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, I awoke from sleeping at random. It wasn't for a bathroom break or anything of real purpose. It was just this random urge to walk outside my room. Being pretty disoriented at this point due to how abruptly I woke up, I shuffled out of my room into the hallway, and what I saw at the other end of the hallway is still vividly imprinted in my brain. Down at the end of the hall, there was a white, mist-like figure in the vague shape of a woman in a tattered dress floating towards me slowly. Her eyes were devoid of any color, and the expression on her face was very puzzling, like she wasn't aware that I was looking right at her or something. I was completely locked in place because of the level of shock I was in, observing this. I'd never witnessed anything like this in my life, and I did not know how to digest it. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to run back into my room, but I also could not. I just stood there and gazed for what I felt was 10 minutes, but was probably closer to 30 seconds or so. I mustered up the strength to take a step forward to get a closer look. At that moment, the figure turned its head off to the side to look seemingly at something else while it continued slowly coasting down the hall. As my foot hit the carpet, the figure abruptly stopped floating and stood straight up and shifted its focus onto me, which sent a rush of pure terror down my spine. I immediately darted the 10 steps back or so into my room and under the covers, hoping to God that the thing can't get you under here. Luckily for me, nothing happened after that, and I was eventually able to get back to sleep, after my heart rate returned to normal. But the experience always resonated with me. I never saw that figure ever again in the house. We never had any other paranormal experiences of any kind that I'm aware of. But I remember telling my friends about it, and a few of them mentioned that they had weird things happen there too. It inspired me to want to look more into ghost and paranormal stuff to help me make sense of what I experienced all those years ago. Guys, that was 9 stories presented to you by Midnight Monster. If you enjoyed today's stories, make sure to show some love to the channel by smashing that subscribe, hitting the like button, and make sure to hit those notification bells. That was 9 of the most paranormal experiences that people have ever had. Drop your comments down below and let me know your stories. I hope to see you guys in the next video. Have a wonderful night.